Well, welcome back to the Sharing the Brain podcast. My name is Steve Magadance, and I'm here with one of my great friends and colleagues who I'll let introduce himself. And we also have a very special guest with us today. We'll let her introduce herself in a few moments. Take it away, my friend.
All right. My name is Stu Guthrie, and as the second part of this podcast, Sharing the Brain, we're always looking for folks to come on and share their brain with us. We're going to let Mandy introduce herself to get us going. But before I say that, they both are from Wisconsin. So if you start to hear about cheese curds and pot buddlers or whatever they're talking about, you'll know where that's coming from. All right, Mandy, introduce yourself and let's get this going.
Hey, everybody. My name is Mandy Froehlich. I'm a former elementary teacher, technograder, and then the good fortune to retire from being a director of innovation and technology right prior to the pandemic. And I have been consulting for many years, full-time since I retired. And I have authored a few books, a couple on teacher, educator mental health, and then one on innovation and divergent thinking. And so that's pretty much what I do, is work with districts on teacher leadership coaching, starting online programs, a range of different things.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for being with us, Ms. Froehlich. We appreciate it very much. And as we get started and thinking about it, I was looking at your website and I love the title Divergent EDU. I know that's the title of one of your books. Mm-hmm. And in particular, when we think about like divergent thinking, that's a lot of times where growth happens. And when I think about that idea of how we can grow and improve our practice as school leaders, I wonder about the idea of taking care of teachers. We have obviously been in the middle of this global pandemic for more than a year now. We're anticipating changes. People are getting vaccinated, but there's still a lot of just uncertainty out there. And that has really had an impact both on students and on teachers. And in particular, thinking about teacher mental health, what we're thinking about constantly this year especially is how do we take care of our most important staff members, our teachers in the building? How are we keeping them happy, keeping them healthy? And then also thinking about long term, how are we taking care of teachers to continue the passion to teach and interact with kids and create really enriched learning experiences for them? I saw that you had done some recent work around that, some recent writing, maybe a recent podcast. I'm just wondering what your thoughts and what you might share with other school leaders around the idea of taking care of teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that that's a huge question. And I think, when we talk about Divergent EDU a little bit, one of the things that I did in the book Divergent EDU is really define divergent teaching and what that meant. And part of it was challenging your assumptions and limitations. And I think that out of the big, long definition that there is, that's my favorite part. And I think right now there's no better time to do that, right? Than, at the sort of what feels like coming to the end of a pandemic to really, we challenged our assumptions and limitations in the beginning. Now we need to challenge our assumptions and limitations again. What are we doing to really bring education forward now that it's been disrupted? Are we just going to go back to our old way of thinking, or are we actually going to move forward and do something with this disruption that we had? And one thing that's definitely been disrupted is the idea of educator mental health. And I've been talking about educator mental health long before the pandemic, because the pandemic simply highlighted the need for help. It did not create the need. There's always a lot of discussions around like educator attrition and teachers leaving the field, but I don't want anybody leaving the field. Like if they went into education, they went in for a reason, and I want them here. However, my bigger concern is always the teachers who are here and miserable and can't leave, because I was that teacher. And that's why I started talking about this, right? Like so much of what we do stems from an experience that we had. And my experience was that I was miserable and I loved my students and hated everything else about teaching. There wasn't a single thing I liked. But I couldn't leave because I had 4 kids and I needed the insurance and I needed the income. And so leaving wasn't an option for me. And, and when they tell you in college that as long as you get a degree, you can work anywhere, that's a lie. You can't actually do that. And so my big concern right now, even, is the educators who are here who really are miserable and who can't leave. And so I want to, I've really been working hard on finding ways to sort of disrupt the status quo around what we're willing to talk about and not talk about in relation to educator mental health. And so, what I'm finding is that people are very willing to talk about mental health. They're willing to talk about resilience and gratitude and mindfulness and self-care. Like they're comfortable. That's like the comfort zone right now. But talking about any kind of mental health issues is it's not, it's considered negative. It's considered not, being a team player. It's considered all of these things that it just, we can't talk about one and not the other. It's like a seesaw effect. And if I walk into your building and I don't have the ability to say to you, look, my anxiety is ramped up today. Is there any way that, you could just stop in for an extra 15 minutes and just tag team with me at some point in time today? Like if that would be looked at like I'm not a good teacher, that's a problem. And so that's really why I want to try to sort of disrupt this status quo of what's been happening with educator mental health, so we can get people more support in that area in education.
I think that's a fantastic way to put that. And you're right. We don't talk about that openly. I know that, Steve is a high school principal. I'm a middle school principal, and our campus is smaller. And he actually has a fairly small campus too for the district we're in. But, talking about the family, the feeling of a family, we start out our faculty meetings with family business, and it may be somebody's mom is in the hospital. We just do all that kind of thing, and it's purposeful so that we feel close to each other. We kind of know each other's going on. Now, I did hear in one of the podcasts that you were a middle school teacher and that you taught home ec, but you couldn't cook.
Yeah.
So that would cause a little bit of stress, I would think, in your position. But no, Steve and I, like I said, we both have had experience working together before, and so we kind of feel the same way. But talk a little bit more, if you can, about what it takes to build that level of trust with each other in the building, if you can, and how that may look as a leadership position. How do you build that trust and that culture in your building?
Sure. So I can sort of go a few ways through with that question. I'll give you sort of two of my favorites. And the first one is that when you take a look at a building or even a district, but I like to stay at the building level. If you take a look at a building, and you feel like there is not a trusting climate and like a really positive, cohesive culture, a lot of times people will say we need to work on the climate and culture. And I agree. However, that's a very broad,
Sure.
umbrella term, right? And one of the things that I think people are missing as they, if I tend to think that when you think there's an issue, it's actually, if you dive into it deeper, it's actually a different issue. If you really look at what's happening, sometimes the issue in climate and culture is belonging. People don't feel like they belong. If you don't feel like you belong, you cannot be happy working there. Until you feel like, because belonging is such a fundamental feeling. It's such a fundamental human feeling. And one of the issues that I see really often is that educators are actually disengaged. And disengaged is a term that I use to describe like burnout, demoralization, suffering from secondary traumatic stress, dealing with a teacher trauma or a personal or professional adversity, and you pull away from education. That would be sort of, a giant term for that. But if you really think about the teachers that you have in your school and they're not responding to climate and culture changes, that maybe it's really negative and you can just feel it when you walk in the building, a lot of times it's because the staff is disengaged. And so instead of starting with climate and culture, start with staff engagement. And that doesn't mean making sure that they're paying attention during professional learning. It means how happy are they in their jobs? And that's a very individual tactic to choose, an individual strategy to choose, instead of looking at the entire group as a whole. You're looking at each individual teacher. how much do they love being here, and trying to figure out how you can make them love their jobs more. Now, the second thing that I would say is that it sort of falls under, I don't know if you're familiar with the love languages. That's what it reminds me of. So the love languages it's a book and a concept that says that I receive love in a certain way and I give love in a certain way. And for my partner, wife, spouse, whoever to be happy, kids, it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship, friendship, whatever. That other person needs to, it needs to be cohesive. They have to be able to accept love in the way that I give it in order for everyone to really be happy. And I think that there's a leadership component of that.
Sure.
And that comes down to support instead of love. And so this idea sort of started with the fact that I was a tech director in a district, and my mentor, who was a tech director, deputy superintendent in another district, I said to him one time, like, how do you feel supported? Because I walked into buildings and districts sometimes where some teachers are like, oh my gosh, my principal's amazing. They support me no matter what. And I talked to another teacher with that same principal and they're like, oh my gosh, I just need to get out of here. Like, how does that happen? You know, like, how is it so different? And I said, like, I really feel supported when I know my administrator has my back. Like, when I know that if I screw up, my administrator is going to be there and be like, we're going to figure out how to fix this and we're going to do it together. And I said, that's how I feel supported. What about you? And he said, well, I feel supported when there's good communication. He's like, when there's really clear, concise communication, that's when I feel supported. And I'm like, yeah, I guess, you know, like, but that didn't really do it for me. And so what I was thinking about that was, if there was an administrator that was a very clear communicator, but wasn't awesome about having a teacher's back, he would feel supported and I wouldn't. And what I gleaned from that was that I feel like it's the responsibility of educators to be able to actually be self-aware enough to directly say how they feel supported. I feel supported when my principal blank does whatever. And I think it's the responsibility of the administrator to say, I am going to address my staff and how they individually need to feel supported. And in that support, you know, that doesn't seem like I didn't say mental health in any way there.
Sure.
That it doesn't matter, because like, we don't always have to address mental health head on. We do also have to do that. But from an administrator standpoint, that's a very sticky road, because I've been in buildings where administrators have required teachers to report back on what they're doing on self-care. Yikes, don't do that. Because first of all, you make them hate self-care because now it's part of their job, but also it's a very fine privacy line. So if you can't address mental health head on all the time, you have to be able to address the support that's needed so that they can manage their mental health. And so I guess that would be two things that administrators could do.
That's very well said. I like the way you talked about the love languages. I know Steve and I, living in San Antonio, tacos are kind of a love language. So whenever we have a faculty meeting, if you can bring tacos, that's a good in to people's hearts. Steve, what's your take on that?
Well, what resonates with me about that is this idea of, you know, the multiple hats, right? Like, you think about like a teacher, you know, addressing the needs of students, right, in the classroom, and knowing that students come in with different tools and different learning styles. And I think it's still very much the same with teachers, although my frame of reference is thinking about teacher learning styles. And we had another guest in a previous podcast that talked about 3 different styles of adult learners. There was an instrumental learner, there was a socializing learner, and there was a self-authoring kind of learner. And, you know, administrators, when they put together professional development, needed to think about those 3 potential styles, right, and how to address the needs of those particular learners. And what I hear you saying is that, like, being able to address the very different styles of care is an important thing. And where someone feels cared in one way, it's different for someone else. And knowing that is going to be super important. So like the fine line of gauging that and not crossing over the line of privacy is super imperative. really important going forward, right? Because if people feel cared, then they're more able and willing to, to care for their charges, their students, and that's what makes a good community, I think, is what I hear you saying.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
No, 100%. I know we're going to wrap up here pretty quick, and Mandy, we really appreciate your time. I did want to bring up just one more thing, and through our district, we're going through the PLC process, and hearing what you're saying about communicating, and like I'd shared previously about creating a family atmosphere, I think that does kind of foster that. But you talked a little bit about, like, I'm not sure you use the term self-actualization, but something about being self-aware for your own mental state and being comfortable enough to share that. As we wrap it up here, is there anything that you could share with us about teaching that or supporting that, maybe to get your administrators or leadership team or teachers also, to embrace that and be willing to share how they're feeling at any one time for the good of the organization?
Well, I think that self-awareness is probably one of the, if not the most important pieces of healing. Because in order to be able to help yourself heal, you have to know how you're feeling and be able to name that and be able to work through it, and also know yourself, what you need and how to vocalize what you need, how to tell people appropriately what you need. You need to be able to figure out when, if your needs can't be met because for whatever reason, like if your needs can't be met because it's just your needs are more extreme than what anyone's able to offer, how you can get those needs met outside of wherever you are. And so there's a lot of pieces of self-awareness that I think are imperative to be able to heal and move forward. And, it goes a little bit with emotional intelligence as well. Like how well do you know yourself and how well can you read others? And I think we assume that teachers, because education is such an emotionally charged profession, that we sort of assume educators come with a high emotional intelligence and self-awareness, and they don't necessarily. And so I think that giving people opportunities for reflection, I think probably one of the most imperative pieces of helping someone else with self-awareness is just giving them the tools to know what they're even looking for. Have somebody come in, explain what it is, run them through some things that they can do on a daily basis, practicing gratitude, mindfulness, meditation, whatever it is, but also being able to recognize emotions, name emotions. What does that mean? Work through old emotional baggage. Like those are all things that people don't inherently know how to do. It's also not necessarily something that anyone can do for you, like an administrator can do for you. And I equate it a lot to, we've talked about growth mindset for a while now, right? I can give you all the information I want on growth mindset, but you're the only one who can develop a growth mindset. I can't make you do that. I can make you learn a math intervention. I cannot make you learn I cannot make you have a growth mindset. And so I think that, mental health and self-awareness and some of those things are much the same way. And so from a leadership standpoint, the best thing that you can always do is give people the information so that they feel like they can move forward with that information. And I think a family atmosphere, I think, is awesome. Having that family time and saying, like, what's going on in your lives. I think that's fantastic too. I mean, I think about all the times that I worked in a school that, the other half of the school, I had no idea what was going on in their lives. And, and so I think that that's a really powerful thing. It will definitely work to destigmatize some of the issues that people want to talk about when they're ready to be vulnerable.
I do want you to tell us really quick about your books and where to find them. And then Mr. Magadance, if you'll wrap us up, that'd be great.
I'll try.
All right. So you can find my information on www.divergentedu.com. I have a lot of free resources. Well, some free resources on there. I'm still building that bank a little bit, but there are some things on there. There's a free educator self-care course, for example. There's a mindfulness course, some free resources, and then information for all of my books as well. And so, again, you can find that on divergentedu.com, and you can find me on Twitter at Froehlich M, FROEHLICHM.
All right.
Yes, Mandy, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate the time. You spent a lot of time talking. Maybe you'll have to hit the bubbler after this to cool off your throat.
You guys.
Yes, perfect. No, it was really great getting a chance to talk to you. It was really great connecting with you as another Wisconsinite. And I hope that you all take some time to check out the resources on Divergent EDU with Mandy Froehlich and check out some of her books. My personal favorite right now, looking at the title, is a companion to, I believe it's Reignite the Flame. It's the Educator's Matchbook, it looks like, which is a cool little play on words. So we appreciate your time, and thank you else of all for our listeners and joining us this week or this time on I think it's episode 4 of season 2 of Sharing the Brain. We're now on some new podcast platforms, so hopefully you can find us where you listen to your podcasts. And if you're interested in sharing the brain with us, you can shoot us a tweet at Sharing the Brain, or at Magadance, or at Mr. Guthrie Tweets. And thanks for your time, and y'all have a great day.